Rewire is a company that I formed, and the truth of the matter is I formed the company because I saw too many people, and I'll kind of show this here, going to seminars, reading books, coming into coaching calls, whatever it was, and there just seems to be this draw, and I think we get the concept of motivation, and again, I don't have time to go into all of that, but it's so common for people to get motivated very temporarily, and then down there in the right-hand corner, this happens to us by Monday, right? We get motivated, and then we kind of come back to what we always did. And I'm not saying that people, again, don't make some changes and there aren't epiphanies from time to time, but it's so common to get really excited, go to something really cool, and then come back and kind of be in the same rut. And so Rewire is about taking a hard look at what needs to rewire in our minds for that effect to stop happening. Right? I mean, you could be listening to this call, and I'm not going to try to guess that people are going to have an epiphany around wow selling, or an epiphany around wow I'm more of an artist or a scientist, but they could. But if you do, and you don't rewire your brain, then the likelihood of you going back and just having that be something like, wow, that was great, and I can't even remember it 2 days from now. I mean, I don't want you to push out another survey, but if I could ask people the question, when was the last time you read a book, loved it, and then 3 weeks later couldn't tell anybody the first thing in it? And if I had to raise my hand, I'd tell you that happens. And, it's very possible that that's happening even more and more. Possibly as technology grows and we become that much more sensitized to all the stuff that's going around us. But the truth is, I think a lot of people, they want to make changes, they want to make positive changes, and the last thing I'll say, and the reason I kind of started Rewire, is that I really believe that, to me it's sort of a spiritual thing. I think we were made in God's image to get better. I really do. I think every single day we're called to get a little bit better. And so when you go to something and you want to get better, or you wake up and you go, I want that, I want to improve here, I want to wow my clients, I want to whatever, I think that's built into us. And then lastly, I'll just tell you that I don't want to get into this too much, but for anybody that's ever taken a course in physics, there's a theory in physics that really stems out of the second law of thermodynamics, and the theory is entropy. So entropy, again, there might be some people on the call that, I could get way over my head here really quickly, but entropy is really all about the fact that the universe is in a state of decay. When left alone, any matter in the universe moves to disorder. So you're sitting there going, okay, why does that matter? Well, if you couple the fact that we want to get better every single day, people want to, that's hardwired into you, there's a wiring. And you think about the fact that entropy exists. So in other words, a car, if you don't touch a car, never improve upon it or whatever, does it get better or worse? Your body, if you don't ever work on it in any form, you're just going to let it go, will it get better or worse? Or your mind, if you don't work on it, will it get better or worse? Well, again, those are hypothetical questions, and the answer for everybody should clearly be worse, because you learn something. In this world, I know that gets pretty philosophical, but things are either getting better or they're getting worse. You cannot stay the same. You can't stay the same. There's no, and people, here's what's crazy, your lizard brain, which I'll talk about, wants you to try to stay the same. There are people that are on the call right now going, I'm pretty successful, why would I do anything new? Well, because if you don't try to get a little bit better, by default, you're going to get a little worse. There's no coasting. You're going to get a little better or a little worse, or a lot better or a lot worse. You cannot coast. If you try, entropy will cause you to get a little bit worse. Does that make sense? Is that kind of clear on that? I don't know. Anybody? All right. So that's kind of why I created Rewire.
That was, by the way, very, very clear.
Okay, good. You kind of went off there. I don't know. I'm talking into a box now, so who knows? So
I had it on mute, so I was talking to a box.
No problem. So let me just, again, we don't have a whole lot of time here. If you go back and even look at the logo of what Rewire was designed to do here, there's a little lizard up there. Lizard brain is something that quite a few scientists over the years and different thought leaders have been talking about for a long time. The concept that every single one of us has a lizard brain. Your brain is designed to do one thing, and it's to help you survive. That's it. Survival is the only thing your brain was designed primarily to do. And so in order to survive, your brain does 4 things really, really effectively. Now, this might all sound like, okay, well, where are we going with this? Why are we doing this? If you understand what your brain is trying to do, then it will give you some clues as to why each of us has the propensity to read a book, go to a seminar, get motivated, and then go back to what we always did. And so part of getting through that is being educated that we've all got this thing called lizard brain. You have a lizard brain, Dave. My lizard brain is in full force all the time. Everybody's got one. When you learn about lizard brain, you're going to be mad at it, and you're going to want to kill it. You can't kill your lizard brain. If you killed your lizard brain, you die. It has to live with you. However, if it controls you, you'll never get any better. I shouldn't say never. That's extreme. You're going to have a tough time changing even positive things. So the lizard brain does 4 things. I've got little slides up here to show you. The first thing the lizard brain does is it looks for familiarity. Your brain every single day, and I have this woman driving in a car because one of the things that I have people in my workshops and people that I've coached do is, starting tomorrow, I want you to drive to work differently. And there are people that when you say that to them, they get kind of like, that's weird, man. I love the way I drive to work. I'm not changing that. We want familiar things. When things are familiar, then you survive. Get it? Because you're on the call right now, right? You probably have clothes on. You're dressed. And you could probably look around and go, man, I make money. I'm surviving. I want the familiar things. Well, that's good, and some of that's good, but only searching for familiar things is one of the first blocks into getting better. Does that make sense? Like we come away from seminars and go, yeah, I want to go from X to Y, and we hear language that people use like go to the next level and all that. You know, the next level implies a change, and so the next level will be unfamiliar. And if you're not equipped to understand that the lack of familiarity is going to cause your lizard brain to go, don't do that, which is one of the key reasons why we come back on Monday and we, you know, look like that guy in the bottom right-hand corner again. So familiarity is the first thing. There's some cool tools that we're going to use to help people break familiarity. The second thing is being right. That's the second thing that the lizard brain does. First is familiarity. The second is to be right. I have a picture of Mustard up here because I have a really good friend and client who told me a story about, and I told the story at the experience a couple of years ago with Building Champions. And again, we would never mention who, but this client basically got into a debate with his wife about whether or not they needed mustard in their house in a supermarket. And really quickly that conversation escalated into one thought they did, the other thought they didn't, and then they started to debate and argue about it and fight about it to the point where they were talking about divorce in the supermarket. Because one didn't trust it, you always do this, and they just totally escalated it. And then when my client was telling me the story about it, he came in and he basically said, and we got home, and I was right because we had a lot of those already.
Hey,
well,
so Steve, yeah. I'm sorry, but I have to challenge you on this one because I know when it comes to getting along with my teenage daughter and a successful relationship with my wife that I need to change this, and I have to be always wrong in order to have positive relationships.
Well,
is that just me, or is that like a common thing?
Again, that would be a little extreme. You know, you're not always wrong, and that would be a little extreme.
I know. My 8th grade daughter thinks I am, though.
Well, yeah, well, that's a whole other call. I'll do, but whatever. I think what I'm trying to do here with this slide, maybe the kind of an action I would give people if you kind of find yourself like, I find this really strong sense of having to be right. Well, your lizard brain has to be right. That's not just you, Dave. That's all of us. We all want to be right. But the one thing I like to coach people on, and I've done this at Building Champions for years, is it's a different equation. Rather than thinking right versus wrong, maybe we could begin to think right versus peace. Do you want to be right or do you want to have peace? And that, if you could begin to like bring that into just consider a different equation, can't tell you how many things that will save in your life. And not always being right. By the way, we don't think of this, but if you want to be that guy going to their gal, going to the seminar and getting better, it's so funny. What we used to do felt right to us. So when you do something new, your brain will actually go, well, that's wrong. There was right and that's wrong. And that's, if we keep thinking that right and wrong equation, we don't change. The third thing that your lizard brain does is it looks for what we call habituation. I have a person laying on a couch here. Basically, your brain wants to lay on a couch. It really does. It doesn't want to have any effort. And if you think about survivability, like, again, I'm not an expert in this. I know Barry Engelman is there building champions. If you get lost in the woods, or, if somehow you're out in, you're out in the wilderness and you're lost, one of the first things apparently they teach you is to conserve energy, right? That'll cause you to survive. You don't go out and waste a bunch of energy. Well, your brain's doing that all the time, which is exactly why we have some habits. And by the way, I picked a different slide, and I went to this one. I thought it was a little bit more neutral. I picked a person chewing their fingernails, or you could pick somebody smoking. There's some habits that we have. And in order to break them, yeah, I know with like smoking and different drinking, whatever that might be, you get into sort of a physiological part of that too. But part of it is to break that habit, your brain's going, do you have any clue of how much energy that will take? And your brain, your lizard brain's whispering to you all the time, you don't have the energy. Don't waste that energy doing it. Get it? And so there's another reason as we talk about success and as your people hear about success, one of the reasons we can rewire is because we actually have the power, and you do have the energy to break some habits. And again, I hear things like, and again, maybe there's people on the call, and I've heard selling techniques of you can break a habit in 21 days and stuff like that. Maybe. But for some people, they've been building that habit for 40 years, and I just am not the kind of guy that thinks, oh, you can do that in 21 days. I think people underestimate the difficulty of this. And I don't think it's overly complex, but I do think it can be difficult, but possible. In fact, if we don't look at the difficulty of it, oftentimes I think we get motivated, don't go to the proverbial next level, because we underestimated the difficulty. And then we get wiped out by an enemy we didn't think existed. So I'd rather call the enemy out and go, look, it's hard. The last piece that your brain does to survive is it looks to control. It looks to control. It wants to control. I literally last week had a client tell me, man, Steve, I can take a whole bunch of stuff in this mortgage business. I hate the feeling of not being in control. And I kind of chuckled to myself, and I thought, oh, you and 7 billion other people on planet Earth, nobody likes not being in control. And I even look at mortgage banking today. Look at how much lizard brain has affected us. Look, if you're an originator on the call, if you're a manager on the call, if you're a CEO on the call, every one of these parts of our lizard brain has been challenged in mortgage banking in the last year and a half. Every one of them. Things aren't familiar to us anymore. You wake up every day and there's a new FHA guideline, there's a new circular, Fannie and Freddie come out with something, underwriting guidelines are changing every day. You think that challenges people's sense of familiarity? How many times have we heard, oh my gosh, I used to do it like this. This is how it's done. I'm right. And we get into fighting about who's right and who's wrong when things have changed. There's the be right thing. We've had habits that we don't want to break, and we all feel out of control. You can't talk to the appraiser anymore. You can't do this. There's no talking to the underwriters. We feel out of control. Every part of your lizard brain is on heightened awareness, and then we wonder why people aren't changing as effectively as they could in mortgage banking. But the good news is you can, because you can be aware of these things. And so that's kind of what we did in Rewire. So I just kind of wanted to bring it back to our talk really quickly, Dave. I got about 3 or 4 minutes before I have to jump, and I know the rest of the people do too. If you've thought about, hey, I'm more of an artist and I'm more of a scientist, and that makes sense to you, and you want to go, man, I want to deploy a little bit more science. Well, that thought will challenge your lizard brain. And if you're not familiar with what the lizard brain is, or even some tools on how to rewire that, all it'll ever be is a thought. And you'll go off into the future being an artist, and that's okay. You're not going to shrivel up and die. But if you want to deploy more science, you have to embrace the fact that your brain is saying, don't deploy anything new, because I don't want to change. And certainly if you want to be a scientist deploying more art, how do you like that scientist guy? I think a scientist to deploy more artists, same thing, going in reverse. I do think it's a blend, Dave. I do think if you want to wow clients, you have to be somewhere there in the middle. I do think people can do that, and that's kind of what my project of Rewire and the company is all about, and I kind of want to bring that to the world. I've brought it to the world for the last 4 or 5 years in coaching. I think the coaches here at Building Champions do a great job of that. And so, yeah, I think we need to, I have this guy out here. Part of getting this is being aware of it. Now, I think there's some other tools that we can do, but even raising the awareness to it, most people's lizard's brain go, I don't want to talk about this, I don't want to talk about this. You will find change difficult, but possible. And I think that brings me right back to where I started with, that's what gets me excited is when people actually change. People actually change. And you don't have to, you don't have to, but I just, Jim Collins, the great, author and thought leader, he wrote that book, Good to Great, and he said the enemy of great is good. And I thought, how perfect for lizard brain. If your life's going pretty good and you make pretty good money, and then you attend a seminar where you learn you can be great, just know that your own brain will go, I like good. Great sounds okay, and you can simultaneously agree that that could be cool, but your brain will fight you. And again, I don't know about fight. That's kind of a different word I wanted to use, but there's something in you that will resist change, and when you can see what that is, be aware of what that is, and actually change, I think you can do some pretty remarkable things.